The Chinese regime says it will continue to upgrade its nuclear weapons. The statement comes just a day after Beijing pledged to work toward a world without nuclear weapons. The Chinese Communist Party is not qualified to host the Olympics. That's what a former Chinese Olympian says, after competing for years under the regime. An iPhone and an iPad exchanged for a small bag of rice, and 2 packs of cigarettes traded for vegetables. In the Chinese city Xi'an, residents turned to bartering to cope with lockdown orders. 20,000 bottles of Lithuanian rum get redirected to Taiwan after Beijing blocked the shipment amid trade tensions. And with another tough year behind us, families are finding hope in a premier classical Chinese dance performance. The performance presents the audience with the lost world of traditional Chinese culture and a glimpse of what the nation looked like before communism. Welcome to China in Focus. I'm Tiffany Meyer. The Chinese regime says it will continue to upgrade its nuclear weapons. The statement comes just a day after Beijing pledged to work toward a world without nuclear weapons. Here are the details.
On Monday, the world's 5 largest nuclear powers issued a joint statement, approved by the United States, Russia, China, the United Kingdom, and France. It says a nuclear war cannot be won and must never be fought, and that nuclear weapons should only be used to prevent war. The statement comes as tensions rise around the world. The Chinese regime has been threatening to invade Taiwan, and Russia is moving troops towards the border of Ukraine. But right after the statement, a senior arms control official from China's foreign ministry announced that the regime will continue to modernize its nuclear arsenal.
And secondly, it doesn't mean that China is not modernizing. We do not deny that China has taken measures to modernize our nuclear arsenal, if not for other reasons, but for reliability and safety issues.
But he urged the United States and Russia to be the first to cut their nuclear stockpiles. He cited the fact that the 2 countries control the largest number of warheads in the world.
And we will be happy to join if they have reduced to our level.
But some wonder whether it's a good idea for the U.S. to sign a joint statement with the Chinese regime.
And China, was able to get in a statement against nuclear proliferation. Of course, that sounds great on its surface, but in reality, what's going to happen is, A, China is going to violate its promises and proliferate nuclear weapons and nuclear missile technology to whomever it pleases if the price is right.
During his confirmation hearing, the Biden administration's ambassador to China also indicated the Chinese regime's words should not be trusted.
They have said for decades, the Chinese government, that they want to have a minimum nuclear deterrent. They are blasting past that definition, and they're rapidly engaged in the buildup of their nuclear arsenal, including the disturbing reports of the hypersonic technology.
In a November report, the Pentagon warned that China is expanding its nuclear force much faster than expected. The regime could have more than 1,000 warheads by 2030. The same month, a U.S.-based nonpartisan national security research group found that the Chinese regime has made significant progress on suspected silo fields in the western part of the country. The group called it an unprecedented nuclear buildup. What's more, Core said such an agreement may also hinder the U.S. ability to defend its allies.
If we're not allowed in response and in defense to provide nuclear technologies to our allies that are under threat, like Taiwan, South Korea, Japan, Australia, Ukraine, and other frontline Eastern European states against Russia, then all of those countries are highly vulnerable to Russia and China, who can use their overwhelming conventional strength to outcompete us. Because we can't be everywhere in all places globally at once. We can't protect every single territory.
He argues that nuclear weapons could be useful for some of these frontline democracies to defend themselves.
With the 2022 Olympic Games just a month away from kicking off in Beijing, a former Chinese sports legend tells the Epoch Times that the Chinese Communist Party is not qualified to host the Olympics. That's for its human rights record and the tennis star Peng Shuai.
Once China's national pride, Huang Xiaomin, a former Olympic swimmer, is voicing disapproval over the upcoming Winter Games. Specifically, the fact that the Chinese Communist Party, or CCP, is hosting the event.
The Olympics are built on the principles of peace, friendship, and equality. The Chinese Communist Party is not qualified in any of those categories to host the Olympics Games. The party does not have the Olympic spirit. It tramples on human rights.
Beijing will hold the 2022 Winter Games in February, but an international diplomatic boycott continues to cast a shadow over the event. That's as Beijing has become embroiled in a series of human rights scandals. Among the latest on the list is tennis star Peng Shuai and her rape allegation against a retired CCP official. Soon after sharing the accusation online, Peng vanished from the public eye.
Peng Shuai was just doing what she's supposed to do.
In an interview with the Epoch Times, Huang expressed her support for Peng, but she added something startling, that she believes there are many more Peng Shuais in China.
Under the Chinese Communist regime system, I think for us Chinese athletes, what happened to Peng Shuai is not a surprise.
Huang says life is cruel for Chinese athletes under the regime's rule, explaining that they're reduced to nothing once retired, regardless of their achievements. To survive, especially for female athletes,
willingly or unwillingly, they resort getting to a wealthy, powerful man to back them. After all, as athletes, you have to survive in China.
Huang says for the average athlete, these stories get virtually no attention. Huang was the silver medalist in the women's 200-meter breaststroke at the 1988 Seoul Olympics. But she says the halo of her success came with a price.
There's no self-personal rights or dignity. The party decides what you do, the coach tells you what to do, and you'll just have to obey.
And on top of that, there's the doping. According to Huang, for a highly promising athlete in China, a set of carefully designed training programs are used along with the doping scheme. Huang says it's humiliating, but explains it's a state decision. That intense doping and training mechanism is systematic and often results in multiple illnesses and injuries. Many Chinese athletes have been forced into early retirement because of it. Huang retired young too, in her early 20s. That's due to heart disease and the risk of paralysis after intensive training. She says many Chinese athletes retire with lingering illnesses and are desperately in need of food, a doctor, and a job. But they usually get nothing, as an athlete's worth means little to the regime after their competition years are over. Referring to Peng Shuai's incident, Huang says despite her great achievements in women's tennis, that's her final fate. Huang also expressed deep concern about the well-being of Chinese athletes. She says only when the world sees through the CCP will it speed up the regime's demise.
That's the only way to help the Chinese athletes and people out from under the CCP's suppression.
She adds that the regime's lack of respect for human life means it has no place in hosting the Olympics.
More protests against the Winter Games are cropping up, and one of them is making noise in Los Angeles. Human rights supporters there are constructing a large sculpture to go along with their demonstration. NTD's Don Ma has more.
At Liberty Sculpture Park, Los Angeles-based human rights supporters are building a large display. It's part of their protest against the upcoming Beijing Olympics. They say the black background of the panel represents the darkness of the landscape in mainland China. They've also replaced the Olympic halo with gray barbed wire rings. Those represent the prisons where Chinese prisoners of conscience have been held. They say that China doesn't deserve to hold the Olympics due to the country's human rights record.
China is the worst country in the world in terms of human rights. In China, Falun Gong, those in Xinjiang, and Tibetans are experiencing the most difficult human rights situation. Because of this, we can no longer have a laissez-faire attitude about it. We want to tell the world that the Olympics cannot be held in China.
Liu Yiquan is a member of the Social Democratic Party of China. He says China's goal is to use the Games to burnish Beijing's international image.
The CCP has been violating human rights in China. They have brutally persecuted Falun Gong. They have cracked down on other religious groups. They have also brutally suppressed other groups like pro-democracy activists and dissidents. Such a criminal regime is still trying to hold the Olympic Games, using it to feign an image of peace and prosperity. That's why we must strongly oppose it.
As of now, the display is visible to vehicles driving along LA's Interstate 15. Don Ma, NTD News.
The student newspaper at Yale University has a policy of not publishing anonymous columns. But in this case, the Ivy League school made an exception. Over the weekend, a powerful essay about Chinese tennis star Peng Shuai appeared in the Yale Daily News. Peng went missing after publicly accusing a former senior Chinese Communist Party or CCP official of sexual assault. The Yale newspaper had to publish the column anonymously. That's because the author of this piece is a Chinese student at Yale with family in China. The newspaper has granted the student special permission and says the student, quote, might be harmed by the piece being published with the author's name. In the article, the Yale student voiced strong concerns for Peng's safety and called on the international community not to allow her to be buried and forgotten as the CCP planned. The editor-in-chief of Yale Daily News, Rose Horowitz, tells Voice of America that the decision was not made lightly. She says it was based on sufficient evidence that Beijing has been using advanced softwares to track and silence overseas critics. One of their top targets is Chinese students studying abroad. The Chinese regime says it wants to host a green Winter Olympics, but the host city Beijing is very prone to smog. The city is still preparing for the worst as the opening ceremony looms. Dhruv Tikikar reports.
China is preparing to hold what it says will be the first ever carbon-neutral Winter Olympic Games in February, but concerns over air quality loom over the host city, Beijing. Authorities have warned that winter smog risks there remained severe. All 26 Olympic venues are spread out between the capital city and the surrounding Hebei province, collectively a region dominated by heavy industry. Hebei has vowed to, quote, transform and upgrade that economy. Since being chosen as the host back in 2015, China has planted thousands of hectares of trees in Beijing and Hebei province, built sprawling wind and solar farms, and relocated hundreds of enterprises. Authorities denied, however, rumors that heavy polluting industries in the area would be shuttered ahead of the Games. Environmental group Greenpeace has said that without more data, it would be hard to evaluate whether China can meet its carbon-neutral goal.
Some residents in China's Xi'an city have started trading goods for food. That says strict pandemic restrictions have made it hard for locals to buy kitchen staples. For 2 weeks, the northern Chinese city has observed lockdown orders. At the beginning, one person per household was allowed outside once every 2 days to shop for food. But a week into the policy, authorities tightened the rules, banning even these brief, infrequent trips outside the home. This measure is supposed to prevent pandemic from spreading. The city is now a hotspot for virus cases and boasts a total population of nearly 13 million people. Local authorities promised to supply food and other essentials amid the total shutdown. But a number of residents are complaining on social media, saying there's a lack of food and insufficient service from authorities. To cope, some of them have started bartering. One video shows a person trading with her neighbor, handing over a bag of rice for an iPhone Plus and iPad.
你好。你好。这个手机，一个平板。我家就带米了，菜没有了。行。好。
One comment on the video reads, "If it were me, I might not put the rice up for trade." Another video shows a man exchanging 2 packs of cigarettes for a head of cabbage. And much to the delight of the man receiving the vegetable, he's given an extra tomato and carrot as a bonus. A photo posted online reveals what authorities are delivering to residents. These vegetables are meant to feed one household for 2 days. Another picture shows officials holding a banner with packages of food stacked behind them. According to the person who took the photo, the officials gathered to take the photo but left soon after, taking the food with them. The situation also seems to extend beyond food. One video has sparked concern online. It shows a woman crying in quarantine as she begs for feminine hygiene products.
还有，我来大姨妈了，也没有卫生巾。我从昨天开始一直打12345的社长热线，然后没有人能处理这个事情。到 报警，也没有人过来接我。
Yet another Chinese city is being locked down. This is according to a local Communist Party statement on Monday. Authorities in Yuzhou City, Henan Province, are ordering all 1 million residents to self-quarantine. The statement says that no one is to take a step outside their homes. Despite the strict measures, authorities said on Tuesday that they don't know the number of cases in the city. But they said that the virus control and prevention situation in the city is very severe. Vehicles are banned from going outside as well. That's unless they have clearance from virus control officials. Authorities are also halting activities in supermarkets apart from the supply of daily necessities. Meanwhile, elsewhere in Henan Province, cities are enforcing similar pandemic measures due to a rise in new virus cases. Local authorities announced that they'll be restricting residents' movement in parts of Zhengzhou City and Taikang County. Virus control measures in these areas include keeping residents at home, banning public gatherings, restricting entry into the region, suspending certain businesses, and virus testing. Authorities are only allowing residents to leave their homes once every 2 days to buy groceries. Disgruntled investors in China are taking to the streets, speaking out over their losses tied to real estate Evergrande Group. Around 100 of them gathered outside the cash-strapped company's offices in Guangzhou on Tuesday, chanting the phrase, "Evergrande, return our money." Police and security soon arrived on the scene. Evergrande did not comment on the incident. The company suspended trading in Hong Kong on Monday. The company said the halt was pending an announcement featuring inside information, but didn't give details. The company announced on Monday that local authorities had ordered Evergrande to tear down 39 residential buildings. These buildings are currently under construction and are located on the southern island province of Hainan. Local media reported that the demolition was due to illegal construction and environmental violations. According to Hong Kong veteran market analyst Francis Lun, the order recalls over $1 billion in potential profit.
Frankly, I don't know how China Evergrande will be able to survive this debt crunch.
The company is now drowning under $300 billion in debt. One of the big three ratings agencies, American Fitch Ratings, declared in December that Evergrande had defaulted and downgraded its credit ratings. Evergrande has failed to meet multiple debt payment deadlines. The passing of the latest deadline gave the indication that the company had met its obligations and rattled stock prices last week. Shares of Evergrande plummeted nearly 90% last year. Hong Kong authorities sentenced a pro-democracy activist to 1 year and 3 months in prison on Tuesday. It was for organizing a vigil commemorating the 1989 Tiananmen Square massacre. Before June 4th last year, Zhou Xingteng submitted an application to hold a gathering for the anniversary, but Hong Kong police denied the application, citing virus concerns. After it was rejected, Zhou posted online. She called on Hong Kong residents to commemorate the massacre by lighting a candle wherever they are. The Hong Kong court said that Zhou broke the law by inciting others to take part in an unlawful assembly. Zhou represented herself in court. She argued that she called for candles to be lit anywhere in Hong Kong and was not calling for a rally. Meanwhile, also on Tuesday, Hong Kong leader Carrie Lam rejected claims that press freedom faces extinction in the city. This despite a recent police raid and arrests targeting a pro-democracy media outlet.
This morning I read news about because of the closure of online media, press freedom in Hong Kong faces extinction. I just could not accept that sort of allegations.
Police raided the office of pro-democracy outlet Stand News. Authorities also froze its assets and arrested 7 current and former senior editors. And another independent Hong Kong media outlet is also shutting down. The outlet Citizen News said on Monday that it was triggered by the closure of Stand News. Taiwan is buying Lithuanian rum that Beijing rejected amid trade tensions. That's more than 20,000 bottles. The story began last year when Taiwan opened a de facto embassy in Lithuania. Communist China claims self-rule Taiwan as part of its territory and prevents other countries from building diplomatic ties with the island. Although Lithuania and Taiwan do not have official diplomatic ties, opening the new office means deeper ties between the two. Then, in early December, Chinese customs removed Lithuania from the list of countries in its system. The European Union stepped up and accused Beijing of blocking Lithuanian exports. Beijing denied the accusation and later put Lithuania back on the list. But Lithuanian exports to China still cannot get cleared. In December, Taiwan learned that over 20,000 bottles of Lithuanian rum were drifting at sea and blocked from China. Taiwan's state-owned Tobacco and Liquor Corporation soon connected with the seller and bought up all the liquor. The rum is scheduled to hit the Taiwanese market by the end of January. On Monday, the U.S. and 8 European countries showed support for Lithuania against Beijing's economic coercion. The 8 European countries were all part of the communist bloc. Together with Lithuania, they built a political alliance a couple of years ago in reaction to Russian aggression. The new government of the Czech Republic is expected to take a tougher stance against the CCP. The new government of the East European country took office in mid-December, and the new foreign minister, Jan Lipavsky, is making no secret of his hawkish view on Beijing. In October, he called out Russia and China as both a threat to the Czech Republic, and he argued that his country's foreign policy has to properly reflect this. The foreign minister also showed that he wants the country to turn west. He vowed strong cooperation within the European Union and NATO and pledged to pursue a renewed human rights tradition. NATO is a military alliance between the U.S., Canada, and dozens of European countries. The minister last summer called for China to be excluded from bidding for contracts for a Czech nuclear power station. He also supported better relations with Taiwan, calling the democratic island an important economic partner that's many times more important than China. The new government's attitude towards the CCP is in stark contrast to the path taken by its current president and former prime minister. Both were more friendly to the CCP and Russia, while being more hostile towards the U.S. and the EU. A political analyst told Politico that the country's current direction marks in symbolic terms the end of post-communism in the Czech Republic. Now, on a lighter note, with another tough year behind us, families are finding hope in a premiere classical Chinese dance performance. The performance presents the audience with a lost world of traditional Chinese culture, the one that existed in China before communism. Let's hear what the audience members have to say.
This New Year's weekend was one to remember for many people, including Carolina Vera, who brought her family to see Shen Yun at the Duke Energy Center for the Performing Arts in Raleigh, North Carolina.
Out of that, you just feel happy because it's a lot of messages that probably in these new days we have forgotten. You know, it's just peace, hope, and that there's still a beautiful world out there.
Vera says her 2 children have always had a bond with Chinese culture, and this performance deepened that bond.
我很喜欢了Shen Yun.
Vera's mother can't understand Chinese or English, but she said the performance still brought her joy.
She felt very happy inside because she could understand different meanings.
Shen Yun draws inspiration from China's 5,000 years of civilization.
What I like about the entire performance that I've seen so far is this sense of the continuity between traditions going back thousands of years and the current situation that people face today in China and around the world.
With its mission to revive traditional Chinese culture that has been destroyed.
Events like this that I think that bring us closer to the Chinese people before communism.
It was very moving because it just was so real and raw, and it didn't, you know, a lot of times when you go to performances, there's just not a lot of depth, and there was just so much depth to the story and to the history, and just we learned so much.
Some audience members said the performance can unify people.
I think bringing people together, the celebration, elevating the soul, elevating the mind.
One of the consequences of the pandemic is a lack of connection, people physically and emotionally being separated from themselves. And I think that a performance like this that shows performers all together on the stage acting in concert, telling a story and being in perfect synchronicity, I think that's a symbol for what we need to get back to post-pandemic.
I think this is a message that needs to go out to everyone. That in this world we're all alike. We're just all alike.
Shen Yun will be performing in 7 states throughout the U.S. and in Europe this week.
And that's all for today's China in Focus. Thanks for watching and see you tomorrow.